Hello everyone, welcome back to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, dated 5th January 2026. Today again we will be discussing some important topics that has appeared in today's The Hindu and the Indian Express newspapers which are relevant for your examination. In the initial two articles, we have included two mains practice questions which will be useful for your upcoming mains examination. So in the first topic, we will discuss the major challenges faced by the gig workers and the way forward. After that, in our second topic, we will examine the success stories that have helped the transforming Indian agriculture along with the major challenges which are faced by the sector and the measures to address the same. After that, in our simplified section, we'll take up 5 articles and we'll try to explain them in simplest language possible to enrich your understanding of the newspapers. Additionally, we have also incorporated some prelims pointers which is going to be useful for your upcoming prelims and mains examinations. So have a look on them also and stay tuned. So let's start our discussion with the first topic, that is gig economy, flexibility at work, insecurity in life. The context of this topic is that in today's The Hindu newspaper, there is a write-up that has appeared and that is focusing on the abysmal economic and social conditions of gig workers. And this article is also focusing on various suggestions that can be incorporated to address the underlying issues. And this topic is related to your GS paper 3, Industrial Policy, issues related to development. On the eve of New Year, there were various gig workers who went on strike, particularly because of various demands that they gave to the government as well as to the platforms on which they were working. For example, their demand with regard to the pay structure, income insecurity, lack of proper social security were some of the highlights related to their demands. Also, we need to understand that who exactly is a gig worker. So, an individual who is employed transactionally on a time or task based manner and having the flexibility to choose their hours of work. For example, let's suppose there is a person who did his B.Tech or graduation from any reputed college, and after that, let's suppose he was recruited by the TCS. So the person will have to go various rounds of interviews, and only after that, if he will qualify in all the rounds of the interview, he will get the appointment letter. And then this person, let's suppose the name is A, who got the appointment in TCS, will have to comply with various norms of the company. For example, there will be fixed working hours. For example, let's suppose the working hour is 10 to 6. Along with that, there will be dedicated time of the lunch, everything. And if this person is working beyond office hours, he will be getting various allowances. His salary will be fixed. Along with that, he will also get various social security benefits. For example, if the person became ill, so the company will bear the cost of the hospitalization under the insurance that is provided by the company. If there is an unfortunate death that is happening of that person who was employed by the TCS, so the family or the dependents will also get certain amount because there was a life insurance that was provided by the company. Along with that, there will be a proper working conditions. For example, that person's desk will not be under the sun itself, rather there will be a proper environment, proper office with ventilation, AC, everything. So there are fixed working hours, but there are certain other benefits that this employee is getting. So there is a fixed employer-employee relationship, and that is being governed by various laws which has been made by the parliament. For example, there is Industrial Disputes Act. For example, there are 4 labor codes which were notified by the government recently. So this company TCS and the worker will be subjected to these 4 labor codes, which is not the case with the gig worker. Here, this person will choose his working hours, whether this person wants to work from 10 to 6 in the daytime or 10 to 6 in the night time. Whether this person wants to work only for 2-3 hours or he wants to work for 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, whatever the requirement is of that person. Along with that, this person is generally the person who are generally employed on the gig platforms, on the aggregator platforms like Swiggy, Zomato, Rapido, Ola, Uber. They are generally unskilled or semi-skilled, because here, let's suppose if there is a person who is being employed by the TCS, who is getting employment under the TCS, will be having a proper degree, will be having at least some skill. Only based on that, that person will be given the appointment in the company. But here, generally in the gig platforms, generally on the gig platforms, the persons who are getting employment, they generally have the basic skills like they can ride a bike, or they can at least understand and speak English and Hindi and certain other languages if they are in certain other states or certain other areas. So only with the help of these basic skills, these basic knowledge, even without a proper degree, that person can start working. And that is one of the benefits of this gig economy, that it can actually help us in giving some kind of employment avenues to this whole demography, the working age population. Because the India Skills Report 2025 says that, 24 says that, more than 50% of the graduates are not having proper skills with the help of which they can get a proper employment. So a person will need certain money, certain food, with the help of which they can sustain their life. So one of the means by which they can sustain their life, they can at least earn some money, is this gig economy. And as per the report of the Niti Aayog, as of 2020-21, there were more than 7.7 million workers who were employed under this gig economy. And it is projected to increase to around 23.5 million by the year 2029-30, because this expansion of the gig economy is being witnessed. Earlier, they were limited to certain tier 1 cities, certain urban areas, but now they are expanding to tier 2, tier 3 cities also, smaller cities also, smaller towns also. So that is the reason that these people who were in these smaller towns, smaller cities, will also be employed under this platform. Along with that, the lifestyle of the people are also changing. Let's suppose this TCS worker who worked from 10 to 6, and then let's suppose if he also did certain 2-3 hours of overtime on that day, and if that person is coming home at around 9 or 10 in the night, then there may be a case that this person will not have that much of energy that he can do some work in the kitchen and he can make his or her food. In that case, that person will be opening Swiggy or Zomato, and he will or she will order whatever the food that the person will like to eat. So with the lifestyle that is changing of the people, for example, people are preferring ready to eat food, people are preferring cooked food, people do not want to work in the kitchens, especially after so much of work in the office or at the workplace. So that is also one of the reasons why we are witnessing a boom in the gig economy, right? There are various areas, for example, FMCG, pharma sector, financial services, banking, insurance, and the manufacturing, technology and BPO sector, services sector. These are the areas where we are witnessing the expansion of the gig economy. Also, it is not limited to the delivery of the foods. It is not limited to the ride hailing platforms only. Rather, there are various other areas also which where the people are working as the gig worker. For example, let's suppose there is a company who needs a video editor. So they can hire that video editor in a way that it is completely up to you, that you have to edit only 10 videos in a month, whatever the time that you want to take. At the end of the month, we want 10 videos. So that will be completely dependent on that person, that video editor, that at what time that person wants to work. So that is also kind of example for the gig economy. And for the financial year 24-25, there are around 12 million gig workers, and slowly and gradually they became an important feature of India's labor market. That around 2% of the total workforce is gig worker itself. And that is the reason their security, their safety remains paramount. Also, the main tensions that are there as of now is the rapid platform growth versus absence of the labor protection. For example, earlier there were only few ride platforms, Ola and Uber were there. Now Rapido came. There are various other platforms also. Similarly, in the logistics or the parcel delivery or whatever there is for the logistics, earlier there were very few companies. Delivery was there, DHL was there. And now you can see there are a lot of other companies. Similarly, in the e-commerce, there were Flipkart, there was this Amazon only. But now we have Myntra, we have smaller platforms, the platforms who are selling little affordable products like Miso, etc. So because of which also there is an expansion that we are witnessing. But there is absence of labor protection. So earlier, if there were rights that were not being given to only few individuals, obviously their voices were not getting heard properly. But with the expansion in the gig economy, in the platform, the number of platforms which are now present, there are more number of people who are employed, and when they are being exploited, they are not getting their income properly, their social security benefits properly. Obviously, when they are going on strike, so that is now more visible. As of now, a person who is a gig worker, there are various regulation and policy status that they are subjected to. For example, there is Code on Social Security 2020 that also formally recognizes the gig or platform workers, and they also enable various social security schemes that person will be covered. For example, there are certain health insurance benefits, accident cover. For example, if these platforms also give various benefits, that if there is a person who is losing his life because of the accident during the delivery or during the work on that platform, he will be given certain compensation, certain insurance payment. But these whatever these are being said by the Code on Social Security, there is lack of proper oversight mechanism, and that is the reason it is not enforceable properly. Also, there are lack of proper enforceable standards related to the wages, hours of work, grievance redressal mechanism, and the algorithms on which these platforms are working. For example, there is a case of shadow ban that sometimes happen to the person who is employed on that platform. That person will not be able to use his app or get the deliveries for certain period of time. Why? Because there was a poor rating that was given by some customer, because there were certain complaints that were by the customer, by the person who was buying certain product on that platform. So this person who is shadow banned or whose ID is blocked on that platform is not having a clear idea of what is the mistake that he or she did. So this opacity is again one of the major issue with these platforms. Also, there are various state level initiatives that we will also be discussing. For example, Rajasthan and Karnataka came with the dedicated laws for the welfare of these gig workers. But again, there is issue of the enforceability. Along with that, Telangana, Bihar and Jharkhand also came with certain draft laws which are still in the implementation stage. Also, government drafted certain rules with regard to the social security by the Ministry of Labour and Employment that we discussed, that if a person is engaged for 90 days with one aggregator for the benefits, then he will be getting certain social security benefits, and 120 days if working across multiple aggregators, right? So this person will be getting certain benefits related to health, accident cover, etc., and that will be mandated. But again, these rules by the Ministry of Labour and Employment are still in the draft stage. They are open for the public consultation. All the stakeholders will be giving their feedback, their opinion, and based on that there will be a final law that will come in the public domain. Also, the Union Budget 2025 also to some extent gave certain support to the gig worker. For example, they mandated that there should be a proper identity card, so that in case of certain restrictions which are in place, for example, when lockdowns were there, so these were certain essential services. For example, if there is a person who is delivering medicines, so if there will be a proper identity cards, the law enforcement personnel, etc., will not stop that person, or he can go smoothly without any restriction. So Union Budget said that there should be proper identity cards that should be provided by the platform workers. Along with that, there are healthcare benefits for the gig workers that should also be given. Also, majorly the informal workers or the gig workers, they also remain outside the comprehensive social security cover which is given by the Code on Social Security. Also, for example, other laws or the acts that are there, Minimum Wages Act 1948 and Occupational Safety Code 2020. For example, for an unskilled worker in Delhi, the minimum wage is around 19,000, near 20,000, 19 to 20,000 is there for the unskilled worker. Some of these workers are even not getting that level of minimum wages which are mandated by the government under this Minimum Wages Act. Along with that, there are state level regulations, and that also this minimum wages differs from the state to state. Then the Trade Unions Act 1926, whatever the union that will be formed and by these gig workers, that will also not get its due rights under the Trade Union Act 1926, and they will not be specifically recognized as compared to other unions which are formed in the formal employment. Then the Social Security Code 2020, that also doesn't provide any institutional security, means there will not be any support that will be coming from the government as such. For example, there are PF contribution, etc., that also comes from the government. Let's suppose there is a scheme recently, employment linked incentive scheme, where again there is a specific contribution that is coming from the government for both employer and employee for the first formal employment. So these kind of support is not coming for the gig workers. But this gig economy is also contributing to the India's development. For example, it leads to employment generation. It absorbs the surplus labor that is coming from the agriculture and informal sector. It also helps in absorbing the unskilled labor force, which is also witnessed from the India Skills Report 2024 that says that more than 50% of the workforce is not employable. They are not having proper skills. There is poor industry academia linkage. Industry demands Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, big data analytics, but universities and the colleges are not giving proper education in that, and that is the reason people are not getting proper jobs. They are underemployed. More than that, let's suppose this agriculture, which contributes 16.1% to the GDP, but the 46.1% is the employment generation by the agriculture. There is disguised unemployment that is witnessed in the agriculture. There is seasonal unemployment, especially, for example, during the harvest season, during the sowing season, etc. We see that employment is available in the agriculture on the farms, but for the rest of the time these people do not have proper jobs, and that is the reason this gig economy can provide more support to these people who are seasonally unemployed for a particular point of time. Also, it is critical for youth, migrants and semi-skilled workers. For example, let's suppose there is a person who came to any urban area, let's suppose Delhi or any other urban area, and let's suppose he didn't get proper jobs, or the job that he is having is not paying that person properly. Then for some of the time he can also work on these gig platforms, and that can act as a side earning for that person. Also, it acts as a shock absorber during crisis. For example, we also used to go by these ride hailing platforms, etc. And at times when we talk to the drivers or the persons who are on these platforms, working on these platforms, you will get an idea about the different stories, and some of these stories are very emotional. For example, there are various people who lost their jobs during COVID. There are people who suffered a huge loss during COVID-19 in their businesses, and now to sustain themselves, to at least have some earnings with the help of which they can at least afford 2 meals, they are working on these gig platforms. To some extent, the people who are in distress, this gig economy is providing at least some alternatives, some options. Also, the services sector and the GDP growth. For example, the service sector that is contributing more than 50% to the GDP, and all this data that I was telling you, 16.1%, 46.1% is from Economic Survey 2025. So, with rapid expansion of delivery, mobility, logistics and e-commerce, we will further see that there is more contribution from this particular sector. For example, earlier there were only few e-commerce platforms, Flipkart, Amazon were there, but now we see there are a lot of platforms like Meesho is there, which also listed on the stock market recently. There are various other companies like Myntra, etc. So with more platforms, there will be more employment generation that will be happening, and that will also help us in absorbing that unskilled labor force. Similarly, in the logistics, earlier there were this DHL, delivery, etc. But now you see that there are a lot of platforms like eCart is there and other platforms which are helping in ensuring that there is last mile connectivity. Also, with the digital economy and the digital public infrastructure, this will also be see a boost, especially the digital payments. For example, most of the payments that are happening on the gig platforms are online. Also, the GPS logistics, AI based allocation, that all these platforms are also constantly getting upgraded because of the continuous use by the people as well as these gig platform workers. Also, it will strengthen the UPI Aadhaar mobile ecosystem. One of the main reasons why the gig economy saw a boom is the jam trinity, you can say. The internet penetration that saw an uptrend, the increased knowledge about the use of mobile, etc., the fast internet that is now available, 4G, 5G connections, because of which these people find it easier to work on these platforms. Also, the digital economy is projected to form around 20% of GDP by 2930. Also, the MSME and the micro entrepreneurship. For example, as per data from Ministry of MSME, there are more than 6 million MSME employing more than 25 crore people. And some of these persons are getting better expansion, better accessibility to unserved or underserved areas because of these platforms. For example, let's suppose there is a small MSME that is producing some kind of, let's suppose, toys. and they listed their toys on Flipkart, they listed that on the Amazon, Meesho, Myntra, etc. Now with the help of these gig workers, gig platforms, that toy, if there is a person who is placing an order, there will be a delivery executive that will be coming and he will pick up this order, and then after the complete supply chain, after the complete logistics, there will again be a delivery executive that will deliver that order to the person who ordered this. So MSMEs are also seeing a growth because of the help that they are getting. Earlier, it might be very difficult for this particular MSME to ensure that they are delivering that product on their own, right? So it will supporting the MSMEs via last mile delivery and digital technology. Also, the female labor force participation, there is a dual burden syndrome which females are witnessing. They have the burden of bearing and rearing of the child. They also have this burden of taking care of the elderlies, doing household works, etc. And because of which they have the limitation of the time that they can dedicate for the work. And that is the reason it becomes very difficult for that woman to work in the formal sector. But these gig platforms where there is the complete independence about the working hours, these people can also get certain employment. And the flexible home-based work or the time-adjusted work, that also provides certain flexibility to these women, and 28% of the gig workforce is women itself at this point of time. For example, under the urban company, there are various women who are working as the beauticians, etc. And there also they are giving limited time and still they are earning well, and they are becoming financially independent. And the platforms like urban company that enable 40 to 50% higher earnings than the traditional rules. More than that the bargaining capacity of that person also improves, because now they have better opportunity available on the urban company as compared to the local salon on which they were working. Also, the regional decentralization, that expansion that we are witnessing in the tier 2, tier 3 cities. Quick commerce, the demand of the quick commerce like Swiggy, Instamart, then Blinkit, Zepto, etc. They are expanding to a larger extent in the local areas, tier 2, tier 3 cities. There also we'll see that more gig jobs will be created, and it is expected to further lead to increase to 20 lakhs new gig jobs in 2026. And the quick commerce market is also going to expand to 64,000 crore. Tata came, they bought this big basket. There are various other platforms, for example, Flipkart, which is backed by Walmart. They are also coming with Flipkart 10 minutes delivery, Flipkart minutes. Then there is Zepto, then there is this Swiggy, Instamart. From the Zomato, there is Blinkit, etc. So quick commerce market is expanding, and that is the reason there will be new jobs that will be created. Also, there is festive season surge that we witness, especially, for example, recently in 2025, there was 120% surge in the orders on the Blinkit and Zepto. Also, formalization bridge, that digital tracking of the income, skills and work history can also be done by that person. That also enables the targeted welfare design, that government will find it easier to make certain policies, make certain design with the help of which they can target these employees. Also, e-Shram portal, where the informal sector is getting registered. There are 31.2 crore workers who are registered on e-Shram portal. Also, there were net addition of 20.06 lakh members in May 2025 in EPFO. But the major issues which are plaguing the India's gig economy, first of all, the average salary of the gig workers are lower than the regular urban male worker, and this is from one of the survey that says that the mean salary of the gig worker in the country is 18,611, whereas the salaried urban male earns somewhere between 21,500 and 22,800 in financial year 22. So this is one of the major issue, that is income instability and insecurity. And earnings almost fluctuates. There is no consistency with regard to the income that they will be having. Also, that is completely dependent on the demand of the consumer and the platform policy, that if they change a policy that this is the maximum order that a particular gig worker will be getting. So there are long hours but low net income. For example, this is a screenshot that was viral on the internet, that this person worked for almost, let's suppose, 14 hours 39 minutes, and these were the login hours. He got 28 orders, but for that only 762 rupees, and order earnings were 690 and incentive was 72 rupees. And you also have to deduct the petrol charges and the maintenance of the bike that this person was riding. So that is the reason this income insecurity is there. More than that, what we are witnessing, that there are more people who became aware of this gig platforms, and now they are getting employed on these platforms. But the surge is generally festive in nature, cyclic in nature. So for a majority of the time, the order flow will not be there. That is generally during the festive season, and that will be the condition which will be witnessed, that people, despite dedicating large number of hours, they will not be getting proper money. And this is a report, Prisoners of Wheel report, that says that 55% of people work around 10 to 12 hours a day, 20% work around 12 to 14 hours per day, and 1/3 of them earn less than 10,000 a month. Also, the occupational health and safety risk. For example, this 10-minute delivery pressure. But again, I will also want to highlight the view of these platforms who says that these riders do not have any idea about the minutes that are left for the 10 minutes delivery, so that there is no pressure from the platform on these workers. Generally, they are minimizing their time on the packaging, on the processing of the order, so that these persons can get more time. But still, when the person knows that there is a 10-minute delivery platform on which I am working, and if there will be a delay, I might be facing certain penalty, or my rating will degrade, then there will be pressure, and that might lead to accidents and the burnouts of that person. Also, 99% of the person who are working on that, as per this Prisoners on Wheels report, face some kind of physical and mental health issues. Also, there is no compensation if accident occurs during the off-duty time. That if there was no login on that platform, if that person logged out and then that person is going home and there is accident that happened, then that person will not be getting any kind of compensation. Also, weak legal protection. For example, they are treated as independent contractors and not employees. Minimum wages, work hour limits, grievance system is absent. For example, the anxiety that they face, shadow bans that they face, the blocking of the ID, etc., that they face on these platforms. There is no proper grievance redressal mechanism with the help of which they can get some kind of grievance redressal or clarity that why a particular action was taken against them. 82% of these people remain informal despite the legal recognition. Also, algorithmic management and opacity. For example, the pay, rating, incentive, that is decided by the opaque algorithm of that app of that company, and that policy also changes even without consulting these people. For example, earlier this Blinkit was giving a greater amount per delivery charge, but now it has reduced to almost 15 rupees or 10 rupees per order, 15 rupees per order. So this reduction in the amount was done even without consulting these people who are working on these platforms. Also, no explanation or appeal for the penalties or the deactivation of their ID leads to algorithmic anxiety, that this person from morning till evening is having that anxiety, is having that stress, that why that particular action was taken against that person. And this also lead to arbitrary exclusion of certain people who were there on that platform. Also, there are gender and social inequalities. There is 30% gender wage gap in the gig work. This is said by the World Economic Forum itself. Also, women face safety concerns, lower mobility, limited growth. For example, still there are women who face certain issues. They do not face that confidence that if they will be working at late night hours on these platforms, they will be completely safe. Also, there are caste class silently that shape access to better paid gigs. For example, there are various reports that is witnessed. There are various videos that come on the social media that there are people who generally cancel their rights, who generally cancel their orders if a person is belonging to the specific community, specific caste or specific gender, right? So what are the state initiatives for the gig workers welfare? For example, Rajasthan, that is pioneer in the gig worker law. That Rajasthan Platform Based Gig Workers Registration and Welfare Act that came in 2023. That is the first state level law in the India specifically for the gig and platform workers. It also mandate registration, unique ID, welfare board, social security fund. Also, there is a welfare cess that is typically 1 to 2% of the platform transaction, and that fund is utilized for the social security benefits related to health, accident cover, etc. for the people who are employed. Also, there will be a board that will be formed, and that will represent the workers, aggregators, government, and the civil society organizations, so that a proper plan can be carved out for these people who are in the gig economy. Then we have the Karnataka platform based gig workers law and welfare framework. So here again there will be a welfare board will be established, and fund for the gig workers statewide will be pooled. Also, registration of workers and platforms are mandatory. The welfare fund will be financed via contribution by platform workers and the government. There will be grievance redressal and transparency. For example, algorithmic decisions on what basis they are being taken, that also needs to be told. Broad coverage beyond food delivery to ride sharing, logistics, etc. That will not be limited to the Swiggy and Zomato. Rather, other platforms like e-car delivery, etc. will also be covered. Similarly, there is a draft law that is coming in the Telangana. There also they are going to form a welfare board. So what are the measures that can be taken to strengthen India's gig economy? For example, we need to implement social security code, and there should be a proper oversight mechanism to check the proper implementation and enforceability of these code. We need to notify and operationalize health, accident, and maternity and pension schemes. There should be also an objective criteria that on what basis decision will be made, what is the on duty and off duty hours. All these needs to be properly taken care of. We need to activate the aggregator contributions, that these platforms will also be contributing a significant amount for the welfare of these people. Also, we can use the e-Shram and Aadhaar for the portability across state and platforms. Also, government can utilize these platforms for the targeting of the welfare of these people. Also, we can create a minimum pay floor, that earning will be based on the time plus distance plus waiting time. I don't know how many of you recall, probably you people are Gen Z, you people are new generation people. So you might not be knowing that earlier there was a fixed mandatory pay structure for the auto rides, right? That governments also notifies that for the first kilometer this will be the pay structure for the auto ride, and for the subsequent kilometer this will be there. So some kind of pay structure can also come from the government with regard to the time, distance, and the waiting time. Also, index pay to inflation and fuel cost, that if the prices of the petrol is increasing, if the overall inflation is increasing, so the earning of the people should also be adjusted according to that. Also, for example, global example is that New York City app worker, they get the pay floor. In UK also, they categorize the gig workers across three categories: workers, and then semi-skilled workers, and then completely gig workers who are completely independent of the employer-employee relationship. So if there are person who wants to work for 8 hours consistently, so there can be a separate designation that can be given to them, and there can be better policies for them. Also, due process before deactivation. For example, even the due process or the principle of natural justice says that a person should be heard before taking any action against that person. So if there is a shadow ban that is coming on that particular person, if there is a ID deactivation that is happening, so companies and platforms should also think that there is a family that is waiting at home. There is a fee that has to be paid for the child of that person who is working on that platform. There is also certain person who are ailing with certain kind of disease who are waiting at home. So there should be a proper hearing, and only after that the ID deactivation, etc. can be done. Also, algorithmic management and opacity. For example, there should be an objective criterion that should also come in the public domain, so that these workers can also get an idea that what is the algo that is followed for the pay, rating, incentives. And also there should be a proper explanation or appeal for the penalties or the deactivation that is happening. And also gender and the social inequalities, that also needs to be addressed properly. For example, there should be a specific criteria or a specific action that should be taken if there is any kind of discrimination, etc. that is being witnessed on these platforms. Along with that, there should be a proper stakeholder consultation that should also be done, so that all the grievances gets a proper shape and they are addressed in a proper manner. Also, there should be a proper transparency, proper standards for the state-led implementation, that if there is a law that is coming from Rajasthan, Karnataka, there should be a proper mechanism to enforce that. There should be a proper oversight mechanism. There should be dedicated bodies for to check that whether those laws are being implemented properly or not. Also, we can promote the occupational safety. For example, they should be provided with mandatory accident insurance, emergency support and protective gear to ensure their safety during the working hours. Also, we need to strengthen the voice and the grievance redressal. For example, government should also support that there should be certain unions, etc., that can also be formed of these workers, so that their voices are also getting proper shape and they are being heard properly. This is a mains practice question that you people can write from this particular topic. So next topic is a lesson from BEAD in raising farmers' income. The context of this topic is that a write-up has appeared in today's Indian Express newspaper that is focusing on the lessons for agriculture from progressive farmers in the BEAD district of Maharashtra. Also, this is related to your GS paper 3 agriculture. So what is this success story? Krishi Kul. So this Krishi Kul is developed by this Global Vikas Trust, and this GVT Krishi Kul is a farmer training and empowerment center, and this is developed by this Global Vikas Trust under Mr. Mayank Gandhi, and it is not a formal government department or ministry, rather it is a non-profit initiative, and majorly they are dependent on the donations, etc., from the CSR funds or from the general individuals. And specifically it is created to train farmers in the modern and the sustainable agricultural methods, and also to demonstrate improved cropping methods, systems and the technologies that can also help us in improving their efficiency and income. Also, it is going to help in increasing the farmers' income and also build various entrepreneurial skill in the agriculture, so that farmers are not just the producers, rather they are also becoming the entrepreneurs of the future. So they started with one of the program in the drought prone BEAD district, and here there was a shift that was witnessed by the efforts of this Global Vikas Trust under this Krishi Kul training center. So the farmers shifted from traditional crops like soya bean, cotton to high value fruit crops like papaya, pomegranate, guava, sweet lime, banana and mulberry. Now the benefit it provided that the income of the farmer significantly improved, and that was also witnessed from this Tata Institute of Social Sciences evaluation that happened in 2024, that said that the per acre income rose over 10 times, that the farmer who was earning around 38,700, that increased to around 3.93 lakh. Why? Because the value that a farmer will be getting for this particular high value fruit crops is much higher as compared to what they were earlier producing the traditional crops. Also, the scale that has been achieved in this district, that 6.7 crore fruit trees are planted cumulative, and 43,000 acres covered, 30,000 farm families across 5,000 villages. But again, why this training is important? Because to show a shift or to make a farmer aware, to motivate them to shift from the traditional crops to these high value crops, there is a nudge that is required, and these training centers are providing that nudge, with the help of which the farmers are shifting to these high value fruit crops. More than that, there is a proper hand holding and capacity building that is required in the initial stage itself, with the help of which these farmers will be confident that when they will be shifting, their income will not be jeopardized. Similarly, another success story is from Gandhanwadi. So here the Ramesh and Satish Pathade, they are from this Gandhanwadi area, and they were invited to the PM's launch of Pradhan Mantri Dhan Dhanya Krishi Yojana, which will be targeting several districts with low agricultural productivity, and this was launched in Union Budget 2025. Also, Atmanirbhar Bharat Pulses Mission, that was again launched in Union Budget 2025, because they excelled in tur and urad farming, and that is also they are also from the BEAD district of Maharashtra. And in 2023, with the help of Pani Foundation, and they formed a group, Mauli Farmer Group. And with the help of this collective farming, where they pooled their resources, they pooled their knowledge, they shared their knowledge properly, they focused on the chemical free farming, and the tur yield increased from 5 to 14 quintals per acre in 1 year itself, when they shifted to better technologies, better seeds and better methods of the cropping. Also, urad seed production 200 quintals on 40 acres. Also, direct tie-ups happened with the certain companies who are selling organic products, and the value for organic products is much higher as compared to the traditional varieties. And the profits that they earned were around 42 lakh in 2023-24. So from drought hit to national role models, and they are inspiring certain other people to shift to the better technologies, to shift to the better alternatives. Both these success stories are from B district of Maharashtra itself. Similarly, we have another case study that is from the Hiware village, which is there in the Ahmednagar district in Maharashtra itself. That also turned itself into a prosperous village. Earlier it was battling with drought, low crop productivity, farm losses, etc. But they shifted to better alternatives, they shifted to less water intensive crops, they shifted to high value crops, and because of which that is now also called as village of millennials. Why? Because now they are growing less water intensive crops. They are also going for the watershed management. They are harvesting, they are saving whatever the rainwater is coming, and that is being utilized in future for the irrigation purposes. So these studies, these case studies, these success stories can also help us in addressing the major challenges that are hindering Indian agriculture at present. What are these challenges? First is the small holdings that are there. For example, as per the data from Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, 86% of farmers are small and marginal farmers, and they have less than 2 hectares of land. And as per Agri Census of 2015-16, the average per capita land availability is 1.08 hectare per person. So that is the reason there is need for collective farming. There is need for pooling resources so that the mechanization can happen, because in such a small land, tractors, harvesters or other mechanical equipments will be very difficult to use. That is the reason if farmers will pool their land, they will go for the collective farming or they will go for the contract farming. They will be able to get better yields from their whatever the land is there, because mechanization will help us in reducing the input cost, and that will also help us in increasing the income. Also, the productivity is very low. For example, this is the data with regard to the productivity. You can see a comparison, and this is the data from Ministry of Agriculture of Government of India and FAO. For example, for rice, the productivity in kg per hectare, for China it is around 7,000 kg per hectare, and for India it is less than 4,000 kg per hectare. Similarly, for the wheat, the country which is having the higher productivity is 10,000 kg per hectare, that is Ireland. Even the global average is near 4,000 kg per hectare, whereas India's average is around 2,800 to 300 kg per hectare. That is also less than global average. Similarly, for maize, soybean and cotton, our yield is much less as compared to the global average. Why? Because we are still dependent on the traditional seeds, we are still dependent on the traditional methods, we are still dependent on the traditional credit methods, like let's suppose sahukars, etc., the non-institutional credits that are providing the credit facilities to the farmers, that also squeeze up the profits that a farmer can get. Also, technology adoption is not happening. For example, Namo Drone Didi is one of the scheme, with the help of which the spray of the pesticides and fertilizer, etc., can also be improved, and that can help us in improving the efficiency. With the help of micro irrigation techniques like sprinkler irrigation, drip irrigation, etc., the water use efficiency can be improved, soil salinization, etc., can be reduced. So that can also help us in improving the overall productivity. Similarly, irrigation gaps are there. For example, around 43.6% of area is unirrigated as per data from Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. There is a huge dependency on the monsoon itself, and if there is a poor monsoon, then that will jeopardize the income of the farmers. Also, climate vulnerability that is happening, the yield volatility that is being witnessed. For example, the cases of the incessant rainfall that has seen an uptrend recently. Some of the regions which were earlier battling with the droughts like Marathwada etc. in the Maharashtra, they saw a flood like condition, and that led to huge loss to the farmers. Also the poor markets, they are fragmented, chains are there, middlemen are there, adhatiyas are there. Even in the APMC mandis, farmer will have to give various charges for the storage, for the sale of the product. There is a cartelization that is witnessed, and farmer does not get a proper amount for their produce, and that also leads to losses. Also the post harvest losses, whether it is due to climate change, whether it is due to pest attack etc. For example, locust attack was witnessed few years back. So all these leads to losses, and when farmer is not having the proper facility of Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, which will cover all the post harvest losses, because farmer is hesitant to subscribe to this scheme where they will have to give some kind of premium, or they are not aware about that particular scheme, this post harvest losses will also lead to low income of the farmer. For example, this is the data from NABARD 2021-2022. The average monthly income of the farmer is around 13,661 per month, and the average monthly income as per this data from Situation Assessment of Agriculture Household of 2019 was only 10,218 rupees per month. So we can see that the people who are in the farming, their average income is much less as compared to even whatever the basic minimum wages are there. Also the environmental risks are there. For example, the soil decline, the quality of the soil, the productivity of the soil is declining, soil salinization is being witnessed, the fertility loss is being witnessed. And when farmers are not subscribing to the government schemes like soil health card, they are using chemical fertilizer even without using or even without understanding what is the need of soil, that is also leading to loss to the farmers. Also water stress, erratic weather, that is also leading to productivity loss. There is weak value addition. For example, agri processing is less than 10%. There is low shelf life of the product, and that is also leading to loss of the farmers. For example, as per Niti Aayog, there is more than 90 crore of food losses that are happening every year. Also the rural incomes are stagnant. Why? Because when farmers are not going for the value addition, they are getting more or less same money or the same income for the products that they are selling. Also the inflation rate also exceeded the income growth for 7 of the 10 crops. Whatever the growth that was witnessed for the crops, that is much less as compared to what is inflation in the economy. And this is also visible from this data from the survey which was done by the CACP, that is Commission for Agricultural Prices. Then also there are certain other issues. For example, the debt in which the farmers are there. For example, again this is the data from Situational Assessment of Agriculture Household 2019, that says that in 2019 50% of the agri households are in debt, and average outstanding loan amount is around 74,121 crore. Also the crop production in India and China, you can see that it is much less as compared to what is there in China, irrespective of the cereal that we can take, whether it is for overall cereal production, maize, rice or the wheat. Also the small and marginal farmer, the accessibility with regard to the agricultural loan, that has to some extent improved to 76% in 2023-24, but still there is a huge population which is still dependent on the non-institutional credit facilities. They are not taking the benefit of Kisan Credit Card scheme, which is providing loan up to 5 lakh rupees. Earlier limit was 3 lakh rupees. It was extended to 5 lakh in Union Budget 2025. It provides short-term agricultural loans to the farmer. It helps in fulfilling the working capital needs. Then there is Agricultural Infrastructure Fund that also provide loans for the post-harvest infrastructure building. So what is the key lessons that we can take from the Krishikul model of the Beed district? First of all, there is trust building that needs to be done. That the government agencies, the policy makers should understand, should listen to the farmers first, that what are their grievances, what are their needs. So there is a bottom to top policy making that is needed to address the underlying issues, and these problems should be listened with the empathy. Also the science led farming, that is the need of our, especially with the climate change related issues, declining soil fertility etc. that are there. For example, we need to adopt the high density plantation and modern practices. For example, recently recently, India releases genome edited rice Kamla DRR Dhan 10 and Pusa DST rice, which is less water intensive, where the productivity is much greater. So these kind of varieties needs to be expanded to the unserved or underserved areas, so that farmer can get the benefits properly. Also, quality inputs needs to be provided at scale. For example, bulk procurement of saplings of the certain fruits, when they were done, they were at 30 rupees, as compared to if a farmer is going to buy that sapling in retail, that will be costing almost double at 60 rupees. So if there will be a collective farming, there will be an organization who will be procuring various inputs at wholesale level, that will also reduce the input cost and that will increase the profitability of the farmers. Also, it will be supplied to farmers at 15 per sapling through the CSR subsidies that will be given, the CSR funding that will be coming from the various private organizations. So now if farmer is getting 50 rupees per sapling with all the costs that are there, and more than that, this sapling, whether it is for pomegranate, whether it is for the banana, etc., it is going to give fruits for multiple years. So farmer will have better earning. Also, institutional and CSR support. For example, Motilal Oswal Foundation, they contributed 25 crore. Also developed a 25 crore Krishi Kul campus for the crop experiments, hand-on farmers training, capacity building for the new horticulture systems. So this kind of CSR funds also needs to be promoted to address the underlying issues effectively. Also, the measures that needs to be incorporated, that needs to be taken to address the underlying issues. For example, the first important need is the land consolidation, so that we can address the issue of the fragmentation of the land. And when there will be land consolidation that will be done, it will also help us in achieving that economy of scale with the proper use of machineries and mechanization of the farm. The land leasing, etc., will also be much easier. Contract farming will be much easier, and it will also lead to better technology and credit access, and that will lead to higher productivity. Then we have the irrigation expansion. For example, there is Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana that calls for per crop, more crop per drop. There is this PM Kusum Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Kisan Urja Suraksha Evam Utthan, that is providing for the installation of solar pumps on the farms. That will also help us in increasing the yield, in reducing input cost. Along with that, it will also help us in achieving our energy needs like net zero by 2070. So that needs to be expanded properly. Then research and extension, for example, climate resilient crops, high yield crops, that needs to be more researched and developed. For example, as of now, contribution is 0.6 to 0.7% of total GDP on research and development. There are majorly the public sector institutions like ICAR, etc., who are working on the research and development. So there is need for more integration of the private sector. Also, credit and insurance, for example, affordable loans and wider coverage, that will also lead to financial security and sustainable investment. Then, for example, here we have the Kisan Credit Card scheme. There is also schemes to address the post-harvest loss like Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, where there is a constant premium for the Rabi and Kharif crop and for the commercial crops. One premium for the Rabi, one premium for Kharif crops, and one for the commercial crops. Infrastructure and market access, for example, cold storage processing units, rural roads, ENAM, farmer producer organization. All these will actually help us in reducing post-harvest losses and higher incomes. For example, for logistics, government came with the Kisan Rail. Then there are silos that are being developed for the storage. Then there is grams scheme for developing the storage infrastructure at panchayat level. Also, climate smart practices like agroforestry, organic farming. For example, there is just zero budget natural farming which is being promoted by the government. Also, then this organic farming is being promoted by the government. So and then no-till farming or conservation tillage, all that will lead to less use of inputs, and that will actually lead to sustainable resource use, and that will also make our our crops more climate resilient. Also, we can incorporate other recommendations that are given by the Ashok Dalwai committee for doubling farmers' income. Swaminathan committee, which recommended that it should be 1.5 times of the C2 cost, the MSP should be 1.5 times of the C2 cost, which is comprehensive cost. Also, Santa Kumar committee that recommended private sector integration for the storage infrastructure and for other supply chain management, and that will help us in ensuring that farmers are getting increased income. And what we need to understand that we as a country for the agriculture sector needs structural reforms across that supply chain, whether it is backward linkages or the forward linkages. So if we have made a target to double the farmers' income, so that need structural transformation, not the incremental tweaks, and the policy should be from bottom to top. The Krishi Kul model demonstrate a scalable, evidence-based pathway, and what is needed now is the political will and the institutional scale up of replicating that model to the rest of the India. This is a mains practice question that you people can write from this particular topic. Moving towards our simplified section, the first topic is India loses 0.4% of its GDP every year to natural disasters. And this is related to your GS paper 3, disaster management, and this has appeared in today's The Hindu, page number 7. So this OECD Development Center's Economic Outlook for Southeast Asia, China and India 2025 Enhancing Disaster Risk Financing report that was released in December 2025, and that is the report from which this data is sourced, and that is saying that emerging Asian economies that comprises India, China and other ASEAN 11 countries, they face an escalating threat from the natural disasters that are growing in both frequency as well as intensity. For example, as per National Institute for Disaster Management, that is NIDM, 59%, 58 to 60%, around 59% of India's land is prone to earthquake. Along with that, around 40 million hectares, that is 12% of the total land, that is prone to the flood and erosion. Then around 5700 kilometers of our coastline is prone to cyclone and tsunami. All this data is from National Institute of Disaster Management. Then for drought, around 68% of total cultivable land is prone to drought, and 85% of our total land is prone to some or other disasters, and all this data is from NIDM. Also, this chart shows that the disaster occurrence in emerging Asian economy by country and type from 1950 to 2024, and you can see that the flood, earthquake, drought like conditions are seeing an uptrend in last few years. Also, if you see, the floods and storm are primary drivers of the risk in India. Tropical cyclone frequently batter the Philippines, Vietnam, while China and Indonesia contend with significant higher seismic risk related to earthquake. So this chart shows that the total occurrence of disasters in the emerging Asia by country and type. For example, the flood, the earthquake, storm, drought, volcanic activity and other. So in India, majorly it is flood which is creating havoc. Similarly, the average annual loss that is due to disasters from 1990 to 2024, because for whenever a disaster is coming, there is always an economic cost. For example, it will lead to displacement of the people. It will also halt the activities, the industrial activities. It will also disrupt the supply chains. For example, when COVID-19 came, that was also kind of disaster. So it led to supply chain disruptions. For example, with China, for China, there was this zero COVID policy of China with strict lockdown and quarantine measures, which restricted the flow of raw materials and the finished products. Along with that, whenever there is a disaster that is coming, for example, when cyclone is coming in Odisha, in Gujarat, etc., although they have significantly improved the infrastructure or the overall mechanism, administration, that they are now able to tackle that disaster in a better manner, but it impacts the overall normal life of the person as well as economic activity. So you can see that with regard to the climatological, geophysical, hydrological and meteorological disasters, the cost in India, it is majorly the hydrological cost that is there with regard to the floods, etc. Also, the total disaster related damage among the emerging Asian economies from 1980 to 2024, and that is depicted in dollar billion. So from 2010 to 2024, it has surpassed the $600 billion. Similarly, for World's Risk Index by country 2025, the India also comes in a higher risk, that whatever the infrastructure we have, whatever the mechanisms that are there to deal with the disaster, the early warning systems that are there, whatever the mitigation and adaptation measures are there, based on that we belongs to a higher risk category, and that is the reason we need to focus on this. There are certain global efforts to tackle the disasters in an effective manner. For example, there is a Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, and that is from the institution United Nations Office of Disaster disaster risk reduction that provides for global blueprint for shifting approach from post-disaster relief to prevention and resilience. For example, when a disaster occurs, then generally our approach is episodic in nature, that we goes on for dealing with that disaster in whatever the resources that are at our disposal. But what we can do that there can be an early warning system, there can be a proper volunteers that should be on standby, that any kind of disaster that will come, that these volunteers will help us in awareness generation, shifting people to the safer places, etc. So the focus should be on prevention and resilience, that we should shift to the renewable sources so that the greenhouse gas emissions can be reduced, with the help of which probably we will be also able to tackle the global warming, sea level rises. And one of the important conditions for the occurrence and intensification of tropical cyclone is that it needs 27°C sea surface temperature. With rise in the global temperature, sea surface temperature is also rising, and that is leading to more origin and intensification of the tropical cyclone. So if we are dealing with the fossil fuel emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, we are tackling climate change, we are also tackling global warming, global increase in temperature, we are also tackling the increase in the sea surface temperature, we can also reduce to some extent the occurrence and the intensification of the tropical cyclones. Also early warning for all, EW for all, that is from the United Nations, universal access to multi-hazard people-centered early warning systems, global platform for disaster risk reduction, that is again from United Nations, that is a biannual forum to review progress, share best practices, align the DRR processes, that is disaster risk reduction policies, WHO health emergency framework that strengthens the pandemic preparedness, surveillance and emergency response in case of any pandemic that can come in future, global facility for disaster reduction and recovery that promotes the risk informed development and resilient infrastructure. Similarly, we have the World Bank catastrophe risk financing from World Bank that provides insurance, contingency funds and catastrophe bonds. And also we have the sustainable development goals that we have made a target to achieve by 2030, and under that SDGs 1 and 13 is related to the disaster risk reduction that integrates the disaster risk reduction with the sustainable development. India is also taking various efforts, for example CDRI, Coalition for Disaster Risk Infrastructure Development. So India was instrumental in conceptualizing this particular idea. International Solar Alliance, Global Biofuel Alliance, etc. are some of the initiatives which India has taken, and India has taken a lead to take these initiatives so that we can shift to the sustainable alternatives, and with the help of which we can also reduce the occurrence of the disasters and the losses related to that. Next topic is, going forward, much depends on the state's room for the spending. For example, you people would be aware of the fact that under Article 112, it provides for the annual financial statement. That also we generally call as budget, which is an estimate of the revenue and the expenditure of the government. Also, we know that it is presented on the 1st February. Similarly, the state also present their budget. Now, there are certain components of the budget. For example, there is this revenue budget, and then there is this capital budget. The simple difference between two is that if some components are impacting the asset and liabilities, that will be part of capital budget. If some components are there which are not impacting asset or liabilities of the government, that will be under the revenue budget, and it consists of both receipts and expenditure. For example, under revenue receipts, we have the tax like income tax, GST, etc. Non-tax like whatever the fines, etc. are there. Similarly, for the expenditure, whatever the salaries, etc., the grants that are being given. Then for the capital budget, we have again the receipts like borrowings and the disinvestment, and the expenditure, whatever being given for the infrastructure building, etc. So if the revenue expenditure is greater than revenue receipts, that means that there will be a revenue deficit. The government will have to borrow to fulfill this expenditure needs. Similarly, if for total budget, the total expenditure is greater than the total earnings, then again we will have to borrow, and that will be our fiscal deficit. That is the total borrowing. And there is also another term related to this deficit is the primary deficit. That is fiscal deficit minus interest payment. That gives us an idea that whatever the borrowings that we are doing, what is the amount that is being spent on the interest payment itself. right? So for any budget, whether it is central government or the state budget, there can be revenue deficit also, there can be fiscal deficit also. Fiscal deficit will give an idea about the total borrowings. Also for capital expenditure, it mainly involves infrastructure, building roads, etc. So there are two questions which we are hearing repeatedly in the recent months, that how did some states incur a fiscal deficit that is higher than 3% of their GSDP in the recent years, and have the welfare measures or the welfare schemes curtail the space for the state-led capital spending, that whatever the capital spending that is being done by the states for the infrastructure, building roads, bridges, etc. Also we need to understand that there is this article 293 that talks about the borrowing of the state, that governs the state borrowing, granting the states executive power to borrow within India up to the limits that are set by the legislature, that is set by their legislature, legislative assembly of the state. But that also requires the center's consent for fresh loans if the state owes the center money for borrowing outside India. So article 293 clause 1 says that state can borrow on the security of the consolidated fund of the state within the limits that are fixed by the legislature. 293 subclause 2 says that center can provide loans or the guarantee for the state, but subject to certain conditions which will be based on case to case. Also, if a state owes money to the center, it needs center consent to raise new loans, and this was said by article 293 subclause 3. So all the states to some extent, or the most of the states, owe certain amount to the central government, and that is the reason center's consent is needed for the fresh loans, and it was constantly permitted by the central government to different states that they can borrow. Also the 15th Finance Commission, they also recommended that the additional borrowing flexibility will also be provided of 0.5% of the GSDP. Also they can also carry forward whatever the borrowings are there. For example, during financial year 2021, the centers disbursed GST compensation loans of 2.6 trillion to states. It also transferred the 3.7 trillion during financial year 21-25 under the 50-year interest-free capital expenditure loans. Also, the base borrowing limit was set between 3 to 4% of GSDP, and an estimated additional borrowing of 0.5 to 0.1% was allowed by the Union Government and 15th Finance Commission. Also, 15th Finance Commission has given the flexibility to carry forward any unutilized borrowing of the previous year to the following years of the 15th Finance Commission award period, that was from financial year 22 to 26, and recently 16th Finance Commission is also announced under Arvind Pangadia. Also, the second question, that spending by the state government that play a vital role in economic growth of the country. Their spending ability is influenced not only by their revenue position but also the borrowing limit that is fixed by the union government. And since the several states have enhanced their social welfare spending with regard to the welfare of the workers, social security benefit, etc., so we cannot say that capital expenditure is compromising the welfare schemes. Also, since the limit of the states increased, that the borrowings that they can take, so that was one of the reason why their fiscal deficit also saw an uptrend. Also, revenue deficit only widened slightly, and that also shows the fiscal prudent path that states are following. Also, it is encouraging that several states have also ramped up their capital expenditure during financial year 2025, because capital expenditure will help us in earning more revenues in the future. And also the loans and advances of 28 states reported a healthy 18.5% of CAGR during this period, doubling to around rupees 8.4 trillion. Also, we will wait for the recommendation of the 16th Finance Commission and the recommendation relating to sharing of the resource during the Commission's award period, and the details related to base borrowing limits of the state, additional borrowing, etc. will be key to get an idea about the spending space that will be available to the state. Also, this is the data related to state debt to GSDP ratio. For example, some of the states like Odisha, Gujarat, Maharashtra are performing very well. Also, that is one of the reasons that they are they are having the better position in fiscal health index that is prepared by the Niti Aayog. The Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Goa, Jharkhand and Gujarat are kept in the achiever status. Also, the Maharashtra is front runner. This is the final ranking of the states for the 2022-23 period. The index was prepared based on these components like quality of expenditure, that what is the expenditure that is they are doing on the development, all of their total expenditure, what is they are doing on the infrastructure building for the capital expenditure, what is their revenue mobilization, that what is the own resources that states are going for the meeting their overall expenditure, or there is a dependency on the borrowing from the union. Also the fiscal prudent path, whether they are following that, what is gross fiscal deficit, GSDP ratio, etc., what is revenue deficit, what is the interest payment and the revenue receipts of that particular state, and the debt sustainability, that what is the growth rate of debt to GSDP ratio. So these indicators can also be asked in your question. Along with that, this achiever and front runner category states can also be asked in your examination. Also remember that fiscal health index was released by Niti Aayog. Our next topic is OPEC Plus keeps oil output steady amid turmoil among the members itself. And this is related to your GS paper 3 trade, and this has appeared in today's Indian Express page number 13. So what exactly is this Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC? So it is a permanent intergovernmental organization of 12 oil exporting developing countries. India is not member of this OPEC. This is one of the information that you need to remember. This can be one of the potential statement in the prelims examination. And genesis of this can be found in 1960, that it was founded in Baghdad conference by Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia and Venezuela, which are the major oil producing countries. The objective was to coordinate and unify petroleum policies to ensure there is fair and stable prices for the producers, and they can earn the proper benefits, because majority of their economy is dependent on the oil itself. Also, the headquarters of this OPEC is in Vienna, Austria. Then there was this OPEC Plus that was formed in 2016, and that was formed with 10 additional oil producing countries to address the falling oil prices amid rising the US shale oil output. When US shale gas production increased, that was one of the alternative sources as compared to oil. So the dependency on oil was reducing, and that was the reason there was reduction in the prices of the oil. So that too, in the backdrop of that, this OPEC Plus was created. Also, the current context is that the OPEC Plus countries are keeping their oil output unchanged after avoiding discussions of the multiple political crises that are affecting the member countries. For example, the OPEC countries are pumping about half of the world's oil, and this came after oil prices fell more than 18% in 2025. For example, there are tensions between Saudi Arabia and UAE with regard to conflict in Yemen, where UAE's aligned group seized territory from the Saudi-backed government. Also, there are various issues. For example, recently United States captured the Venezuela president Nicolas Maduro, and also US president said Washington would take control of the country until a transition to new administration. So there are other issues. For example, 8 OPEC members, Saudi Arabia, Russia, UAE, Kazakhstan, Kuwait, Iraq, Algeria and Oman, they raised oil output targets by around 2.9 million barrels per day in 2025, equal to almost 3% of world oil demand, to regain market share. So that showed that there are tensions between the countries, there are political differences, there are issues, but still the economy is paramount. They are ensuring that the oil production remain consistent. Also, analysts are saying that it is unlikely to see any meaningful boost to crude output for years, even if the US oil majors do invest the billions of dollars in the country that Trump promised. Because see, again, one of the factors that we need to keep in mind, that Venezuela is having largest proven oil reserves, but extracting that is a costly process. Along with that, there is technological advancement that is needed. So obviously, when the US companies will invest there, they will be able to extract that, but that is some of the analysts that are saying that it is not going to impact overall prices in the near term. Our next topic is mis-selling in insurance a significant concern. This is said by IRDAI. And this is related to your GS paper 3 growth and development, and again this has appeared in today's Indian Express page number 13. So what exactly is a mis-selling? That involves the sale of insurance product to consumers without proper disclosure of terms, conditions or the suitability. For example, let's suppose if there is an insurance agent who is selling a health insurance, but there are certain terms and conditions that agent didn't tell you. For example, it will not cover the bed charges, let's suppose, that is one of the condition. Plus this insurance will be available only after 1 year of buying of the insurance. And once, let's suppose, any person buy this, and then after 6 months if that person fell ill and he is hospitalized, he is completely dependent on this health insurance. But after getting hospitalized, when he is applying for this health insurance for paying the various medical bills, he gets an idea that no, this was available only after 1 year. This was not covering the bed charges. Or let's suppose there is a person who is buying a health insurance for serious illness, but the agent or the company sold a health insurance which is covering just the minor illness. All that constitute the mis-selling. So IRDAI says that the mis-selling is a significant concern in the insurance, and insurers needs to conduct a root cause analysis to identify the underlying causes. And the data says that it has remained almost the same to almost 1,20,429 in 2024-25 against 1,20,726 in 23-24. This is the data about the total number of grievances that are registered against the life insurance related to mis-selling. Similar data is for the other insurances also. Also, the data related to the insurance penetration, that said that it has remained static at around 3.7% in financial year 25. That is much below as compared to world's average of 7.3%. Insurance penetration for the life insurance industry, that declined from 2.8% in the previous year to 2.7% during the 24-25. Also, in this insurance penetration and density are the two metrics which are often involved to assess the level of the development of the insurance sector in the country. Insurance penetration is measured as the percentage of the insurance premium to the GDP, whereas insurance density is calculated as the ratio of premium to the population. That is, what is the per capita, matlab per person premium that is being paid by the people. And what is this Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority of India? So the headquarter of this is in Telangana, Hyderabad. The genesis that it was established after the recommendation of Malhotra committee. In 1999 it was established as an autonomous body, and it got its statutory status after the IRDAI Act of 1999, and the administrative ministry for this is Ministry of Finance. The major objectives of this Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority of India is that they wants to grow the insurance sector, that insurance density and penetration can reach to the global level. Also, speedy settlement of claims with regard to the mis-selling or the untimely claims, etc. Grievance redressal mechanism, whatever the dispute is there between the person who is taking the insurance and the insurers. Also, it provides the insurance ecosystem pillars with regard to the policy holders. It also provides various mechanisms for the insurance providers, distributors, agents, etc. And this IRDA as of now consists of 1 chairperson, 5 full-time members and 4 part-time members. Other roles and functions are that they regulates the insurers, they can also go for certain penalties, etc. Also, they protect the policy holders. That is one of the main aim of this regulator, to save the interest of the policy holders. They also educate various disputes between the insurer and insuree. Also, they promote insurance and the reinsurance of the overall people as well as other insurance products that are available. Next topic is Agriculture Minister says that India has surpassed China and is now world's largest rice producer. This is related to your GS paper 3 agriculture, and this has appeared in today's Indian Express page number 7. So the Agriculture Minister says that India has become the world's largest rice producer, surpassing the China with the total output of 150.18 million ton during 24-25. Also, the China's overall production was 145.28 million ton, and we surpassed that. We reached to 150.18 million tons. And he said this on the occasion of releasing certain new varieties of crop related to oil seeds, fodder crops and sugarcane. Also, he said that these high yielding varieties will help in boosting the crop production and enhance the farmers' income. And on this occasion itself, the chairman and managing director of this National Seeds Corporation gave dividend. Dividend is the share of the profit. So that dividend was also given because National Seeds Corporation is a public sector undertaking. So that is the reason every year from a share of their profits, they give that as the dividend to the government of India. So they also gave this 33.26 crore dividend for the financial year 24-25. Rice requires a high temperature, more than 25 degrees Celsius. It also requires a rainfall that is well distributed to around greater than 100 centimeter. The soil that it requires is alluvial, flood, and generally in flood plains, delta and river valley, this type of soil is available. And this coastal plain soil, high clay content is preferred for the production of the rice. And this is a kharif crop, and it is a water intensive crop. It required consistent water, and that is the reason it is also a source for the methane pollution. And then eastern coast of India, that produces more rice than the western coast. The International Rice Research Institute is in Philippines. Myanmar is known as the rice bowl of the Far East, and Thailand is known as the rice bowl of Southeast Asia because of the production that we witness in these states, these countries. Also, as per Economic Survey 24-25, the current data related to the rice production, Telangana has become the largest producer, then Uttar Pradesh, and then West Bengal. This data is updated from Economic Survey 24-25. Also, As, Aman, and Boro are certain types of rice that are grown majorly in Assam and West Bengal. Similarly, some of the information related to National Seeds Corporation, that it was incorporated on 19th March 1966, and it is wholly owned by Government of India and it falls under Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, and it is category 1 Mini Ratna PSU. The mandate is to produce the foundation and the certified seeds which can be further marketed and given to the farmers. Also, they also is taking the National Seed Project of 1974, that is developing India's seed industry. They have the pan-India networks of offices, farms, processing plants, and storage. They also provide the pan-India network for the offices, farms, processing plants, and storage. They also leads to quality seeds production and distribution, tissue culture plant and fruit crop sapling. They also provide technical support and training to the producers, and they also provide they have the nodal role for the private sector seed processing and storage. They gives various mechanism, do's and don'ts that needs to be followed, and they also export certain seeds to the SAARC countries and the African countries. That is all from today's Analyst. Thank you very much. All the very best. Keep studying.